President Campo and members of the board, let's continue with the superintendent's report. I'm going to talk about the NWA, but first a preamble, because we don't respond to community comments or public speaking, and that's probably the right thing. At the same time,
it's actually by law because of open meetings, but go ahead.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. But at the same time, I want the staff to know, and anybody else listening, that our kids are doing well thanks to you, the teachers, and the principals, and we have the data to prove it. And when people dismiss data, and it must be particularly hard for leaders who are in the schools every day, I'm in the schools every week, to hear that their work is not good for kids, that we're not doing right by kids. And I got to say that. And I think every once in a while, leadership requires us to defend the actual things that's happening, and to applaud the people. We just heard about schools that are doing well, and everybody should applaud that. And when the achievement scores come out in different types of tests, whether it's NWA, which we're going to hear about, or it's STAR, or NAEP, and we can't celebrate the kids, that's dissing the teachers. That's dissing the teachers. And it's dissing the work of the schools. And you all have done incredibly, and I hope teachers and principals are hearing me, because they get the credit, and they deserve, whether they're certified or not, they're getting results, and the principals are getting results. And so we're going to stick with that, and until people can really understand the real work that's going on and applaud our successes, criticize the bad things, yes, but if you can't applaud the successes, I don't know how that builds trust. So, yeah, you can applaud that. That's all right. All right, so with that said, the parent survey, 84% of all the parents would recommend their school to other parents. That's a really well done survey with 11,000 responses, not just anecdote. And then our data is also showing just remarkable improvement. And I can tell the board we've had the 8th set of NWA, 8th set, meaning we do beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of year. So we've had 2 years of that, and then beginning of the year, middle of the year. So 8th set of NWA testing. And every time our achievement goes up, not just growth, the amount of students who are reading at grade level and doing math at grade level. So actual achievement is going up. And so today, we're going to give you a lot more data at the next board meeting when we do the progress monitoring metrics. But today, I just want to give you a brief overview of how well our kids and teachers did in the NWA MAP test that we took 3 weeks ago. And to put it in broader context, because we can give you the numbers, and the numbers itself of how we've improved is impressive, but sometimes, actually most of the time, you should have a broader context, because NWA is a nationally normed assessment. And so I would like to ask Dr. Scott Peters from MWA, who's with us today. He is the Director of Research Consulting Partnership at NWA and former Professor of Assessment and Research Methodology at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. And he'll share a 3-year analysis of HISD's achievement and growth.
Thank you, Superintendent Miles. Good evening, everyone. As Superintendent Miles said, my name is Scott Peters. I'm the Director of Research Consulting at NWA. I have the privilege to be with you tonight to share a little bit about what the NWEA data point to in terms of growth and achievement trends over the last 3 years. It would always be a privilege to be here with you, but it's a special privilege tonight as I'm able to share a lot of the positive results from the hard work that HISD educators have been putting in. Just make sure I knew how to click first. The ask of NWA for tonight was really twofold. There was a desire to better understand trends and progress over the last 3 years, but specifically comparing HISD to other large urban districts nationally. To do that, we examined HISD data for 2 full school years, plus the half year that just ended this past January, when HISD students completed their winter testing. In addition to HISD data, we created a custom comparison group of all of the other large urban districts that use NWA map growth tests. That comparison group, for those interested in the nitty-gritty of the data, is 22 large urban districts nationwide, roughly 1,700 schools. Those schools have an average enrollment of about 550 students, 75% low income, 25% African American, and 45% Latino. I'm going to talk about 2 different metrics tonight. Everything I'm going to present is 2 different metrics, and I want to level set a little bit to make sure we know what we're looking at before I get into that. So the first metric is median achievement percentile over time by grade and by subject. And so what is an achievement percentile? An achievement percentile communicates students' relative standing compared to others of the same grade, same subject, and same amount of instruction. This is something that's unique to how we approach our data. We only compare students to others who started the year at the same place and had the same amount of instruction prior to testing. So a student with a 58th percentile achievement percentile is performing higher than 58% of students in the same grade, the same subject, and testing at the same time in the school year. The median then is just the middle student, so the middle achievement percentile of a group of students, and that's something I'll talk about quite a bit. The second metric I'm going to talk about is years of typical student growth, which is a bit of a mouthful, so I'll just abbreviate it as years of growth. We define year of growth as average growth for the average student. So that is 50th percentile growth for a student who started the year at the 50th percentile, hence the average of the average. Students can start the year out high scoring or lowest scoring, and then they can make above average growth or below average growth. In our years of growth metric, we compare the growth of HISD students to growth that is 50th percentile for the student who starts the year at the 50th percentile. And it gets a little bit clearer when I give this example here. Here we have an example where average growth for an average student is 6 points. We might have looked at Alejandro here. He made 9 points of growth. 9 divided by 6 is 1 point years of typical student growth. So that's one of the metrics I am going to be talking about quite a bit here at the beginning. And that's the result I'm going to start with. So just to restate, we're going to start here with the years of growth metric. I want to orient you to these figures a little bit, so I put this nice big orange box up so no one could look at the results and instead had to listen to me talk about the figure for a second so we all know what we're looking at. We'll start with the 23-24 school year at the top and then go to 24-25 and then the half year ending just now, winter 26. On the left-hand side, you can see our metric is years of growth. There's 2 different colors. The light teal color is for HISD students, and the darker black color there is for all other urban schools on average. Let's start with these 3rd graders, just to zoom in on this bottom left corner here, from fall 25 to winter 26. A year of typical student growth for 3rd graders like that is 4 points. The average HISD student grew just under 8 points. So that's where we get to our roughly 1.75 years of typical student growth. I have other metrics too, don't worry. Here we can zoom out and see the whole picture from 23-24 at the top to 24-25 and then the half year ending in the winter of 2026. And as I've talked about with some other members of the administration, I don't have a lot of additional nuance or anecdote to add about these figures. They're all fairly consistent in that throughout all grades for all years, HISD students grew at higher rates than our national average, than our national normative sample, and also at higher rates than our all other urban school sample. Importantly, this is reading. I'm sorry, I didn't mention that before.
And it seems like they get higher, sorry to interrupt, as the grades go on.
It's a very good lead-in. Thank you for the setup, Superintendent. One kind of interesting way, if you want to be an advanced achiever here, to interpret these figures is to follow them on the diagonal. Because the students who are in 6th grade in 23-24 move on to 7th grade in 24-25, and then into 8th grade in 25-26. And what you are seeing is here is those students made above average growth for all 3 of those years. And that will come back in just a minute where I show these 3-year line trends. Because what we see is as a result of those students growing at above average rates for 3 years, is they continually move up the achievement hierarchy, I guess, if you will. I want to zoom in on these 8th graders for just a second. I was a middle school teacher, so 8th graders can be a little bit frisky. The denominator in these 8th graders for 2026, typical growth for 8th graders in reading is 1 point. Middle school students don't tend to grow as much as other students. So that's a typical year of growth. You'll see here 3.9 because HISD students averaged 4 years of growth. So certainly much more growth than is typical, but anytime we deal with small numbers in the denominator, I just like to point out a word of caution that those can swing a little bit when you got a small number in the denominator. So before my former algebra teachers come after me. Now we'll switch over to math. Here we present the exact same thing. The only difference here is we add K2. NWA, you all did not test with NWA map growth in reading 2 years ago, or in 23, 24, and there is no science test in those grades. That's the only reason you see K2 here. But here you see the same thing. The takeaway is that HISD students consistently outgrow the national average and the average among other large urban districts. The only place where that's less true is really in the early grades, kind of in that K2 space, and that's been true across the different school years. Here we have science, which I always like to talk about because science doesn't get quite as much attention as the other subjects. And really we see very similar trends. Again, no K2 or K1 data because there's no science test in those years. And the only place where we see kind of average rates of growth compared to the urban districts is in grade 2. But remember, that's average compared to the urban districts, which were already growing at above average rates. So being similar to them is not a bad thing. I want to switch now to a different presentation, a different figure, which is 3-year cohorts, where I'm going to compare HISD students to those other urban districts. But before I do again, I'm going to walk you through the figures a little bit. All these will show the same thing, which is fall of 23 on the left to winter 26 on the right. What I'll show first is the all other urban student comparison group, and then compare it with the HISD results. This will allow you to see where HISD students started back in the fall of 23, compared to our national norms overall, and also compared to the other urban districts. In cases where those lines diverge, which is something you are going to see quite a bit of, that is a case of HISD students pulling away or outgrowing their urban peers. At the end of each year, you'll be able to see where your average student fell compared to that of other urban students. And I have these figures for K2, because it's over 3 years, so it's 3-year trends. I have them for K2, for 3.5, and for 6.8 for math, and for 3.5 and 6.8 for science and reading. But for the sake of time, and also simplicity, and also because I was a middle school teacher, I'm only going to present the middle school results, but I have all of the other ones that I'm happy to share, and of course you have in your packet. So here we have a 3-year cohort comparison of HISD students to other urban districts in math, starting in grade 6 in fall 23 and ending in grade 8 in winter of 26. On the vertical axis, we have the mean score for that group, but the dots themselves represent the median achievement percentile. That's where does the HISD's middle kid fall compared to the national distribution. So for example, in fall of 23, HISD 6th graders, the score was a 208.5. In case you're curious. The all other urban sample was a 208.6. But because the dots represent the middle student, those really similar scores actually represent slightly different median achievement percentiles. By spring of 24, HISD 6th graders had pulled away. The average for urban schools fell slightly to the 45th percentile, but the average for HISD grew to the 49th percentile. So it started in roughly the same place, grew apart by about 2 percentile rank points. This steeper growth continued the following year over the course of 7th grade. Again, urban schools grew at the average. They grew at an average rate. That's why they went from 45 to 45. That's the definition of average growth in our model. But HISD students went from the 50th to the 54th, denoting above average growth. And again, the following year, HISD students outgrew their urban peers again, such that by the end of 8th grade, the median HISD student was at the 58th percentile nationally compared to the 40th percentile in all other urban districts. This means the middle HISD student who tested about 3 weeks ago now outscored 58% of 8th graders in our national normative sample. Again, just want to restate that the all-urban sample grew at average or above average rates. This is something we found in quite a bit of our COVID recovery research, that urban schools outgrow most other schools. It's just that in these results, HISD students also outgrew them. Now we shift to reading. As a former reading specialist, I never liked that middle school students don't grow that much in reading. They have fairly flat reading trajectories. In reading, students in HISD were again about the same place in fall of 23. The average score, again, 205.3 versus a 206.3, so 1 point apart, but the same median. The dots overlap. The software doesn't like to make dots overlap, is the long and short. But reading even more than math really highlights the year after year steeper growth that HISD students showed. Jumping all the way to the end, by the time those students got to 8th grade, they pulled away from their peers in other urban districts. The average HISD 8th grader from just a couple weeks ago outscored 61% of his or her peers nationally, while the average in the other urban sample outscored 55% of the peers nationally. Before I talk about science, again, we turn to the caution of the small denominator here, is that, again, middle school students don't grow that much. So from fall to spring, they grow about 3 points in science. From fall to winter, that can be 1 or 2 points. So again, any math teachers in the audience will know when you have a small denominator, you can have some big swings. So you are going to see some big values. Part of that is because of these small denominators, the small typical growth. But still, we see positive results. HISD students are beating their urban peers in science growth. But this growth you see in 8th grade is an example of the HISD students in that line right there made 7 points of growth, compared to 4 points being typical for the all other urban sample. Both grew above average. HISD students grew more. So it's a very real difference, but the researcher in me just always likes to be a little cautious with the data. Oh, go back. I know that was a whole lot of information. I probably already overspoke my time. I appreciate you all listening. I'm happy to take any questions, or I can also pivot to some of the other figures for the other grades, but of course you do have those in your packet as well if you're tired of hearing from me, which I would understand.
I think the data is very interesting and it looks really, really good. So would you just describe it in layman's terms rather than statistics? How good is this relative to the rest of the country?
So I want to pick a good example here maybe. I mean, and I did not pick middle school because middle school is a weird outlier and that K2 looks totally different. This really is meant to be an example, and that's why I've shared all of them with you. I think this graph really does put it pretty well. The fact that you all and the sample of all of the urban districts, so the 23, I guess it is, urban districts in our sample, which are a large number of the largest districts in the country, started in the fall of 23 in very similar places, and now they are 20 percentile ranked points apart. That is a very difficult thing to do. It's hard to get a good comparison because a lot of times we're comparing to pre-COVID years when trends were different, or the samples that change over time. But we spent a lot of time trying to poke holes in this. We have a lot of very smart researchers on my team. We did a lot of things to try to figure out, did we just screw something up? Or is something going on here? Is the district testing at a weird time or something? And we really were not able to find anything. So it's not a very clear answer, but yes, you are growing at above average levels compared to districts who are also growing at above average levels. It is very unusual.
Could you talk a little bit about the veracity of the numbers, right? In terms of the tests were taken, the information was put into the database and then reviewed by your group. Walk us through that, because there's a fair discussion oftentimes about, well, this can't be true and the data's got to be bad.
And how many students take this test,
Right.
NWA tests, across the nation?
Yeah, so put some context around data veracity.
I guess I'll kind of start with the second one first, just about how many students take the data. Just to give you some context, all the results you're seeing that I presented, all those percentile numbers, are compared to what we call our 2025 national norms. They're called that because they were updated in 2025, using 2 years of data on 116 million test scores from roughly 1 out of every 3 schools in the United States. I was a middle school teacher and a psychometrician by training. I've never heard of another test that's had a larger normative sample. I don't think it exists. So in terms of the numbers for comparison, we have them. This is also compared to post-COVID trends. We could do the exact same thing compared to pre-COVID trends, but the difference would be the same. The numbers might be different, but you all would still be beating the other urban sample for sure. In terms of veracity of the data, one of the things we did is, without to get too much into the weeds, these percentiles, as I said at the beginning, depend on when the students tested. And districts give that to us. They tell us when their testing windows are. We, of course, sitting at our desk chairs, don't necessarily know what's happening in the classrooms. We're not educators. But what we actually did is we went and looked at exactly when your students tested to the day, compared it to when the testing windows were set by the district to make sure we were getting as close to apples comparison as possible. We went above and beyond what is actually presented in the regular reports for this comparison. So like, quite literally, if a student had 32 weeks in the system, but we're like, oh, but they actually tested 33 weeks apart, we updated that to make these as precise as possible. I've been at NWA for 3 years. We've never red teamed an analysis more than we've red teamed this analysis.
Can you go back to where you have the other format where you're looking at the years of growth? Thank you.
Yep.
All right, so I want to make sure that I understand this. If we just take the lower left-hand corner, we're talking about second grade. We see HISD at 1.79, and we see urban schools at 1.72. Did I understand the national average is a 1?
The national average would be a 1, yes.
For the 50th percentile after a year.
And that is where there is a little bit of nuance to this, because students who start at different places typically grow different amounts. Reading is perhaps the best example. So let me go to reading here. So in reading, very high performing students do not grow as much during school.
Okay.
Very low performing students grow a lot.
Okay.
So, the difference might be 3 points versus 10 points. The denominator for all kids was the same, like 5, for example. That might seem a little weird. Well, why are you comparing average growth for the average kid, for high kids and low kids? But we're doing that for the urban schools as well. So it's the exact same benchmark. The denominator is the same for both HISD and the urban students. It's just that we're using a single average growth for the average kid as the comparison.
And so am I understanding that because a lot of the urban kids tend to be a little further behind, right, that year of growth, they grow more because they're not as advanced? Is that?
I think there's probably some of that behind here.
Okay.
Again, I mean, yes is the short answer. But we have a report coming out that's about schools that have fully recovered from their COVID learning loss.
Okay.
And one of the things we found is that while urban schools are actually less likely to have rebounded back to that level, they have grown more than the schools that have.
Okay.
So urban schools are growing at very high rates in the post-COVID era. It's just that they suffered larger losses, so they're starting from further behind. So that, I think what you're getting at is why the black bars are also above 1.
Right.
Both groups are growing above the national average. Again, it's just that you all are growing more than that.
A lot more than that.
It's a quirk of this years of growth metric. In addition to being hard to explain, you would have to have this kind of common baseline, which is a little bit goofy because kids do tend to grow at different rates based on where they started.
Which is also why we give you median achievement percentile, meets plus relative to STAR. That's a proficiency metric, and percent met expected growth. All of those metrics tell a more full story.
Can you talk about the tests? How long are the tests? What did they take? Like 3 weeks ago, they took a test. How long were they doing this? How much preparation did they? Could students actually prepare for this specific test? Because you're giving the same test across the country, right? So how does the actual test work?
Sure. So it varies a little bit between like the K. We have like a K2, a 3, 5.
Let's use the middle school kids.
Middle school, this might take about an hour. It's about 40 questions.
Right.
So each one of our tests has about 40 questions. The test pulls from an item bank of about 35,000 items. So a student is not going to see the same items as the student next to him or her. And part of that is because students are at different levels. So if a student comes in fresh, the test has never met the student before. It starts off with questions that are a little bit below typical, just as a starting point. And then as they answer questions correct, they get harder questions. As they answer questions incorrect, they get easier questions. It can actually be, if anyone's ever done this, it can actually be a little frustrating because if you're doing well, you feel like you're struggling. It's kind of strange as someone who's taken some of these. The items are all aligned to Texas standards. So we build tests specifically for the Texas standards. You can go on our website and see what are called instructional areas for things like literacy and geometry. So it's not just like a national test or anything like that. And it's a continuous scale from fall of kindergarten all the way to the spring of 12th grade, so that you can absolutely have 6th graders seeing Algebra 2, geometry items, reading lengthy texts meant for high school. You could also have 5th graders that are reading more basic literacy, because the whole point is figuring out where students are. It's a good comparison to STAR. Actually, STAR is very good at telling you who is at the state standard. Map growth is a little bit more about telling you where are students, regardless of how close they are to the state standard. I could talk about this for days. Maybe I'll stop there.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
2 questions. The gray slivers on if you go to the other slide.
The line charts?
Is that just summer slide? What is that?
Yes, ma'am. That's yes,
Okay.
summer slide.
And then the other I wanted to know is when we were in the yellow, you had something that said achievement gap, but I didn't understand what what is this slide?
This is meant to be my slide that explains to everyone how to read the slides, which clearly didn't work because you couldn't even understand the
I
slide
saw
mentally.
achievement gap, and I start like, what are you saying about the achievement gap? So I was ready. I was like,
It's
where are
the
you going
gap
with this?
between the urban sample and the HISD sample. That's what we mean by achievement gap. So
Got it.
in here, for example, the gap at the end of 6th grade in spring of 24 was 4 percentile rank points. It's 4 points. You can look at the gap then the following spring, 45 versus 54, that's grown to 9 points. And then by the end of 8th grade, it's grown to 18 points. Every spring when those get farther apart is a result of the HISD slope being steeper. If they were parallel, the gap would stay the same.
Got
So
it.
we like to look at that end of year gap, which,
Got it.
yeah, achievement gap's probably not the best term.
I would
as an
just say
indicator.
when we hear achievement gap, we're thinking about, we use that differently. So that's why I was like, where are we going?
100% understood.
And then the only other thing, just because you're here, so you guys spent a lot of time with this. Other than this, like, did you have any discussions or musings on your team about what was going on? I just want to know that these are unusual numbers. Any behind the scenes, what did your team think? What does it reveal to you, if anything?
I mean, what we thought was, what did we do wrong? I mean, honestly, we started doing this maybe 2 weeks ago, and there's been a lot of, middle of the night wake-ups, kind of thinking like, oh, how could we have done this wrong? Is there some kind of, inclusion criteria, or did we model the timing different or something like that? We ran it a couple of different ways. We also did some comparisons that created a custom comparison for every single HISD kid. So this was comparing HISD to urban schools. We did a separate analysis that compared every HISD kid to tens of thousands of kids, like every one of them had their own comparison group. And there's this little thing called a quadrant chart, which is growth by achievement. And HISD is all above average in the growth. They're all in the top 2 quadrants. So we could still be wrong. We could still screw something up, but we haven't figured it out yet. I mean, that's what we've been thinking about is what could it be? But
And so I'm going to do the dot, because you're saying the achievement is so remarkable. You thought you made a mistake? I just want to make sure is that what you're saying?
there's an old saying, I think it's Carl Sagan, that said extraordinary claims need to be backed by extraordinary evidence, which is why we spent additional time. We knew this was going to be in front of you all. This was going to be a public venue in front of educators and families. We wanted to be very confident in our results. We spent a whole lot of time on it, and I think
And
we're
you're
as confident.
confident of your results?
I am. Yep.
The other thing that gives me confidence is that our STAR data is very similar. It's remarkable. It hasn't been done before. NAEP the same way. So, and it's year after year. It's not, this is the 8th test.
Okay, I think we really appreciate you coming and giving us this data. I just want to give a big shout out first to the students for their achievement, because they're the ones putting pencil to paper, computer button, what have you, and then to our teachers and to our team here, because you know what, I'm going to take this as extraordinary and really good news.
Is this ready to go? It was great to have Scott, since, we present this data all the time, and, it's more about the numbers, but he did a great job of trying to keep it in layman's terms. He's a statistician, and they can get pretty technical, so I really appreciate the presentation. I'm going to just do just a couple more, because I do want to talk about the achievement gap a little bit. And so just a few more slides on this. This is the median achievement percentile, grades 3 through 8 combined. You can see the growth in the median achievement percentile from the beginning of the year 2023 to now the middle of the year 25-26, and now this graph represents all, so math 51 to 64, huge growth. ELA or RLA, reading language arts, and then science. And this is broken down by subgroup. So about 6% of our students are Asian, 10% are white, 62% Hispanic, 23% black, and then there's others. And you can see that our Asian and white students start at a pretty high percentile compared to all the other kids taking this NWA test, and this is math, and they grew also. But our black and Hispanic students grew even more. Now, they started further behind, but I said 2.5 years ago, the way to close the achievement gap, or to narrow it significantly, is not to depress our higher performing students, but to grow our lower performing students faster. And this is exactly what's been happening. So our instructional quality and effectiveness has grown even for the kids who are doing well already. It has not diminished the instructional abilities of our stronger performers. But our black and Hispanic kids are just moving faster, so they're narrowing that gap. So we got a ways to go, there's no question about that, but you can see that kind of growth is incredible. This is our English language arts, same thing, 81 to 84 for Asians, 80 to 81. So not as much growth for our white students, but still they start at a pretty high point. And this is more of this is your proficiency level, right? This is achievement. But you can see our black students growing 10 points and Hispanics growing 12 points. So much higher, we're narrowing the gap. This is just 2.5 years in. Another 2.5 years, you can see that line just moving well above the national norm. And then finally, science is even more incredible. For our 3rd through 8th graders, you can see the growth, 20 points. And that's incredible. So our subgroup data is looking really strong. I'm not going to go through any more. We have more data for you, but you have it in your charts, number one, or your handouts. And then remember, next month, we're going to go into more details because of the progress monitoring metrics. So I'll save the rest for that.
Can I do one?
Yes, ma'am.
So didn't you guys do something special with science this year? And is that a part of what we're seeing? And my years, I don't remember this fall, but I remember there was a revamp with the curriculum of, what was that?
Yes, so last year we started with providing stronger correlated or aligned, rather, science curriculum. And that has turned out to be very good for our students. We also do 90-minute classes in science. We also started last year, so this is now the 2nd year of that. And you can see it's cumulative, right? I mean, it's every year the kids start off higher, so they go even further. And so I think that's the main reason for science. Kristen, anything to add to that? Okay.
I just wanted to make sure, because I knew you guys were doing something, but so we're seeing the benefits in these structural changes that have been provided.
And just one last thing before we leave NWA, because let me give you some anecdotes also about our kids. So when the NWA test is given, every kid has their own growth metric, right? Because they start at different places. So not the achievement bar, I'm talking about the growth now. They'll have a target, a growth target. And almost every school gives the student a number and say, this is your growth target. This is how many points you have to get. Because of the NWA test, at the end of it, the student gets immediate feedback. They'll get their score. So if their target was 205 RIT points, they'll see they got a 210 or 203 or whatever they got, and they'll be able to tell. And so there were so many cheers and just, look at what I got, look at what I got. And they were so proud of their success. They were proud of their success, and that happened over and over again in almost every school. Even the kids who didn't meet their target, because obviously some of them didn't, the teachers were saying, you know, you did great anyways, you're going to get it the next time, you're close, or, you know, words of encouragement. There was no, like, well, you didn't do it. And I think that's important, because that tells you the culture of achievement. Despite what anybody says, kids want to learn. Kids want to be able to read at grade level and do math at grade level, and they're not deceived when when they're getting in high scores, or their grades may be high, but their scores are low. All right, let's go beyond this. This is all good data, but you'll see it next time. I want to move on because I know it's already been a long evening. So I got to give you some context. We talked about the future focus HIC at the last board meeting and in some of the small group meetings. And you can see we are setting up the district for the next several years. In the next few months, we're setting up the district for the next several years, maybe in the next decade, with the things that you see here. For example, accelerated math for all, we're making it much more rigorous. We want every kid to take Algebra 1 by the time they leave middle school. Not all of them will, but we're designing it so that the vast majority will. We're raising the bar, so we keep going. That's the future. And that's going to be rigorous for our kids. Future 2 we've talked about. Today I just want to briefly touch on level 5 autonomy. We have schools here. This is the update for that. We introduced this, and I've talked about it a little bit with the board, to provide additional flexibility for our highest performing schools. We have defined autonomy, and we're going to actually make it even stronger to where the highest performing schools could have full autonomy. And that's what this is. It's the 1882 partnership, which gives them full autonomy. What does that mean? Because they have a fair amount of autonomy now, but they will have their own evaluation system if they want. They'll do spot observations. Because right now, schools have very little autonomy with regard to evaluation and instruction. Because the autonomy has to be earned. And so now that we've seen that schools have earned it, there's going to be level 5 autonomy. And I appreciate professional behavior here and not interrupt me. Anyway, so that's what we're doing for the level 5 autonomy. The other reason for doing it is it does give us access to more funding. So as you notice, one speaker, the lady was talking about more funding for programs for Energy Institute, Energy Institute. That's the other thing this will do. So greater autonomy for the schools that earn it. We're also bringing level 4, but that's a different story for next year, but that's more autonomy also. And these are the 4 level 5 autonomy schools that have volunteered, by the way, to become an 1882 partner. And so we've been working with them, these 4 schools, and their 501c3 to develop an 1882 partnership. So you can see we started even earlier than October, started introducing it to principals, asked for volunteers, asked for principals to set up a 501c3 or a group to set up a 501c3. In January, so last month, the 4 campuses submitted applications. We scored their applications, and then these applications will be submitted to TEA. If the board approves tonight, the board is voting to authorize me to explore, or my team, to explore and negotiate a contract and apply for 1882 partnership benefits. So we'll have a draft contract, we have one, and we'll work on that contract until the board votes in March 19th, and it's a board decision whether or not they approve a performance contract with this 1882 partner, these 4 schools. And then we have to submit that to TEA. They also have to approve the 1882 part of this contract. So we actually have a little bit more time after the board votes, but then TEA also has to approve it. And that's my update on level 5. Yes.
Thank you. You mentioned autonomy, but what about addressing accountability to continued growth of student outcomes? Could you clarify that, please?
Yes, ma'am. So in the performance contract, it's called a performance contract for a couple of reasons. One, because it outlines all the requirements, but also all the autonomies in the performance contract. But most specifically, it has to have metrics in there for continued operations. So for us, in the performance part of this performance contract, or the metric part of the performance contract, the schools have to maintain their A rating. They also have to have they have to meet budget on finances and a few other things like that. So we're not trying to make it too hard, but we do want to maintain our accountability. So these schools all have 4 years in a row of an A rating. I think we can trust them to continue to have an A rating.
Mike, go ahead.
Yes, sir.
The schools remain HISD schools.
That's right. So in 1882 partnership, the schools only have the authority of a contract, right? And the contract can be limited from 3 years to 10 years. Ours are going to be 5 years for these level 5, and they have to maintain the performance in those 5 years. The building is always remains under the auspices of the board of managers or an elected board. So it is our school building, and the students' scores are HISD scores. So there are students as well, but the operations is the part that is autonomous. The operations of the school is controlled through contract by the board, and it's from one board to the other.
And you will continue, HISD will continue to provide central services to the extent that schools need that sort of support.
So yes is a broad answer, but some of the services they can choose to do on their own, and that's all part of the performance contract. So I'll give you a good example. Let's say they think they can provide the grounds keeping on their own. So we would give them the money that we spend right now on grounds for them, and then they either do it better or they do it worse, but you know, in contract, it can't be so bad to be a hazard. But anyways, that's so, but all the other things like HR, finance, we're going to be supporting.
So the contract is basically a performance contract that is entered into a 501c3 that is going to operate the school, and that HISD will have measures of performance that if the performance measures are not met, the contract can be canceled and the school can be brought back into the situation, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then, in addition, we'll have audit rights, we'll have financial analysis and statements and representations from those groups so that no money will be misused or stolen, correct?
That's correct. And not only that, it's part of performance contract that they have to meet budget, they have to have an audit. So there are clear metrics around that.
Okay, and we're going to get those contracts. You're going to negotiate those contracts. And I understand that TA starts with a form contract that a lot of other 1882s have used, and you're going to have all those things in the contract, give it in advance to the board to be able to review it, and then ultimately the board has to approve everything that's in that contract, correct?
That's right, sir. And one last thing, because we have several representatives from these high schools here tonight, and what we want to do is provide more autonomy and allow them to have more innovation. This is not an attempt for us to get more money or anything like that. So you're going to see in the performance contract that every one of them will have more money next year than they did this year, and fairly significantly more. And that's because we're not trying to write a contract where we're making money off of them. We want them to be successful. And in the end of the day, any district that has a real strong, what's called a performance management theory of action, where we control a lot of the instruction, that is not actually the best way to run a district long term. Over time, you have to allow for individuals to have some different innovations. Now, that has to be earned. You can't have 274 autonomous schools like we inherited, because then you get 121 DNF campuses. But over time, they are earning it. They will earn it, and we'll be able to allow them to have innovation. That lady who spoke today from Energy Institute, she was right on the mark. They want to innovate. They want different robotics and engineering and programming, and we should allow them to do that.
So this is a in-district charter school in essence, right? That's what it's called. It's
Yeah.
part of the 1882. Okay, correct?
Yeah, I mean,
And let me
in some
finish.
ways, yes.
So,
go
so
ahead.
it is that, correct? And as a matter of fact, the elected boards of previous elected boards of HISD have created multiple in-district charter schools that we currently have today, correct?
We have 5 today. We had 6. Yes.
I see. And then the interesting part of that is that had they used an 1882 partnership, the district would have earned $30 million more by just having that as an 1882 partnership.
Yes.
which is
So
really
and the ones
shocking.
that the in-district charters that we have wish they could be 1882. By the way,
Right.
Because it's the same thing, except now they would get more money.
Okay. So there's nothing special about 1882 versus in-district charters that the elected boards have already put in place in HISD over the years.
That's right. And
Okay.
and a number of districts have them. Go ahead, Angie.
So you spoke briefly about presenting it to the principals, and they had the choice to opt in. But I also know that there was a larger discussion. It wasn't just the principals and the staff. It was a community discussion, but we haven't talked about that here. So can you tell us a little bit about whether this is a principal-led issue, or if this is the school community? So how did the school get to decide whether they wanted to take this on or not?
Yeah. So we asked, and by the way, we limited it to high schools, and then we said these are the only ones that could apply, because only these 4, or these, I think there was 12, had 4 years in a row. And we have another 4. So all of them went to their staff and their SDMCs, and I think they did parent surveys. Everybody was able to do how they wanted to do their parent engagement. They had to do SDMCs, if nothing else. So 4 came back and said they want to pursue it. Doesn't mean they want to sign yet. They want to know more about it. And the other 4 others said, we're going to wait till next year, the following year, probably wanting to wait how it turns out. So there's no question, I put it out there as an initiative because, again, we want to expand innovation. But these are totally community-led things. And the reason why you see, like, the Friends of HSPVA is because they are already engaged. And they've been a long-standing organization, a parent organization. And yes, they donate money to the school, and they organize lots of engagement activities. So they're already involved, and the principal, got the okay by the Friends of HSPVA. So it is a close partnership, of course. That's the type of partner you want to work with, somebody who knows the school and works with the school and has a good relationship with the principal, et cetera. And I think that's what we have in these four.
Anybody else? Okay, great. Go ahead, thank you.
All right, moving on. So I want to talk about our facilities and then recommend to the board some consolidations. And we'll have a longer discussion on the 26th, this board and I. But tonight I need to give you the big overview. And I'll be happy to answer some detailed questions, but just know that we have more opportunities. So there's no question that we have declining enrollment. And there's lots of reasons for that I'll get to in a minute. Not only is there declining enrollment, which impacts our bottom line, of course, but we also have our state funding is barely keeping up with inflation and just rising costs. And then, of course, we have aging, underutilized school buildings. So low capacity in many of our schools, or low utilization, high capacity, low utilization, and many buildings that need repair. I mean, again, we just got through the winter, or hopefully we're through it, but, we almost ran out of duct tape, so I'm happy that, the winter ended quickly, because it's just a day-to-day fight for some of our buildings. At the same time, those are our challenges. We've been able to do, in the last 3 years, a lot because we right-sized central office. This year, you're going to see more than a balanced budget. In other words, our revenue is higher than our expenditures this year. You're going to see that by the end of the year. And then we've made major progress in improving student outcomes. So we're not losing students because of D and F campuses anymore. I mean, we have been. It takes a while to turn that around. If a school is an F campus for many years, you got kids leaving for years. We've turned that around, so that's where we are now. But we need to take action to sustain not only the gains, but also to put our district in the best position possible going forward, especially financially. Enrollment, there's a lot of misinformation, and if we're going to close schools or consolidate schools, then we actually need to understand it a little bit. And there's been so much misinformation, I have to praise the Chronicle a little bit because they finally wrote an article on enrollment that had some facts about like immigration policy. They didn't do other things that they need to look at, but at least they got that right. Enrollment across the country has been declining. This is the number of school closures in the last couple years, including this year. You can see the Texas one, San Antonio, Austin. This is not the only ones. These are just the ones that you read about lately. Austin, Aldine. Aldine is entertaining yet another one. Spring ISD, Fort Bend just announced. And many other districts are closing schools and have closed schools in the last several years. This is HISD's enrollment over time, and yes, it has dropped. You can see that. But take a look at when the drop started. In the last 3 years before the intervention, The district lost 20,125. So, and then from even before we got here, the 3 years since, we're 2.5 years in, another 21,000. So the district has been losing kids for quite some time. Even before COVID, the district lost kids. And then, yes, COVID was a huge loss, but those kids didn't come back, and there has to be other reasons for it. So,
Would you please keep your comments to yourself? Okay, then that's your first warning. Yeah, why don't you just get up and leave then? Go ahead, you're done. Would you please escort her out? She wanted to leave, she said so. Well, then you better be quiet. Are you done speaking? I'm going to give you your second. I'm going to give you I'm giving you your second warning now. You cannot ask questions in this medium, and if you want to keep talking, you must leave. Then leave. Then stop talking. Would you please remove this woman, please? Thank you. Now the rules are, you didn't hurt my feelings. Thank you. Again, our rules are you're not going to make comments during presentations like this. You'll have your 1 minute to speak and then you're done. Okay? Thank you.
all right, so we have to understand enrollment that way. And if you look at individual schools, especially in certain parts of the town, the city, enrollment has declined even faster than after the intervention, but it has still been declining. Take a look at Hobby, for example. Much faster before the intervention. Same with Burris. About a little bit more in McReynolds, but McReynolds has lost a lot of kids in the last 6 years. And then the schools that are low enrollment continue to stay at low. Like Briscoe is an example of a school that's around 200 kids, and it has just stayed that way for many years. So that's the enrollment picture, and not to understand this will confuse why we're closing this school or that school, and that's the only reason why I bring it up. One last chart on enrollment, because you hear a lot of comments that are just ill-informed. If you look at the whole state, and this is Texas Education Agency data, this was put together by Good Reason Houston, but anybody can go online and look at it. You see since 2018, the percentage of students every district has lost, and Houston is 5th. That's not, we don't need to be proud of that. It's just that there are many other districts who have lost even more kids from 2018 to now. And we're followed closely by Ysleta, Pasadena, and Alief. Just 1 point difference. So lots of enrollment issues. The question is why, and it's not the intervention, it's a lot of other things. The intervention may contribute a little bit to it, but there's so many other variables, and any intelligent research report that HERC is going to do would mention market forces, deportation policies, declining birth rates, and things like that, like the other districts. Then also we have aging facilities, and you know and I know that if our kids are doing remarkable things, and our teachers in schools, sometimes with holes in the walls. And I'm talking about some of these portables that you've seen. Benavides, go there. Port Houston, just go to some of these schools and you see just the sad state. And yet, they are doing a great job and trying to learn. But they deserve better. And so when the facility is low, and we use the FCI, just to remind you, Facility Condition Index. If it's over 65, that's not good. But we're not even talking about 65. We're now talking about 75, 80, 85. Under-enrolled schools drain resources. It's hard to be a principal of a school with 150 kids. They still have all the requirements, and the class sizes are so small you don't have the same synergy. And we subsidize those, and we have for the last several years. And then replacing or renovating. There's a fraction we talk about, the repair costs over the replacement costs. And as the repair cost grows, and that fraction grows, that tells you it's not worth throwing good money after bad. It's like buying a car. I mean, I've had kids with their cars, and the transmission goes out, then the carburetor, then the wheels. I mean, at some point you have to. The car's only worth $2,000. The transmission is. I can't do that again. So schools are very similar in the fact that at some point you can't replace the plumbing because you could, but it's going to cost you more to do that than to build a new one, or the air conditioning unit and things like that. So we have these schools. During the bond we showed you a lot more pictures, but these are just some of the things. This is not stuff that comes up in just a couple of years. This is decades of lack of attention and preventive maintenance. Proposed school closures. Look, I have resisted bringing something to the board for 3 years. And the reason why is because I feel that schools should be community schools. That is the best thing for kids. And so when I was asked in the first summer, I know some of you weren't here, but you guys remember, I said, no, I'm not going to propose to the board closing schools. Not yet anyway. Not that we wouldn't ever do it, because we wanted to give the kids a chance to have we didn't want achievement to be the issue. We didn't want our failure as a system to say, this is why your school is going to close. But it can't fight time and facilities and aging. And so what bothers me most now is that our schools that have the highest FCI, the poorest facilities, are our underserved populations. That is a fact. You're going to see it and where these schools are located. And that breaks my heart because I think they should be community schools, but they've been losing enrollment for a long time and the facility isn't working. I can't justify keeping kids in a school with some of the pictures you've seen or that has air conditioning unit that goes out all the time, can't be heated, or has just a smell in the teacher's lounge. I mean, just all kinds of things that's not right. So even though we have to close it, we're going to put the kids in a better school, better facility-wise, and as strong instructionally. That's what we're trying to do here. So even though we started this process, I don't know if you remember last spring, we talked to you about facility condition index and how we're going to whittle down and how we choose it. Let me go over a couple of those things here. So most of all, it's about keeping our kids safe and in schools that operate well. I mean, functionally. That's the deal. And if we can't do that, then we got to do something besides keeping them in the same place. While we choose, though, we want to minimize disruption. So local reassignment, improve our learning environments, meaning that the learning environment has to be a nicer building, meaning a lower FCI, newer building, safer building. Make sure that we attend to student needs. In other words, that if they have a program, the dual language, and they need to continue. If they're special needs students, they need to continue that. We can't put them in a place that doesn't serve them the same way. And then academic continuity. meaning if there's an NES school, we try to keep it NES. If it's PUA, we try to keep it PUA, et cetera. Yes, sir.
You mentioned FCI a couple of times. There were some of us who were not here last spring.
Oh, sorry.
But I was on the Community Advisory Committee for the bond, and so I was familiar with, I think, is it the same metric that we're talking about?
Yes, sir. So, and thank you for stopping me and allowing me to clarify. Facilities Condition Index is a report that's done by both our teams and confirmed by outside folks to say, what is the condition of your facility? They look at air conditioning, HVAC, plumbing, safety. For example, if all your doors open to the outside, that's a less safe building. And we have such old schools, and that some of our schools are like that. If there's no perimeter fencing, if there's no vestibule. So all of these things add up to an FCI, Facility Condition Index. If there's structural issues, that's also included in there. So that is a Facility Condition Index. But that's not the only thing we look at. We look at these other things right here as well. We started back in, yeah, go ahead.
Hold on. I want to kind of close the loop on the FCI. So in that context, the administration was identifying high FCI to identify needs, right? Where do we need to go invest? And now it's a little different, but it's really where are the needs the greatest, and at that point perhaps cost prohibitive. Is that
so?
Okay.
Yes, and this chart. So yes, the FCI is one of the biggest things. It's not the only thing, but it's one of the biggest things under data analysis, because we have so many schools with a high FCI. If we just use FCI, we'd close 40 schools, maybe even more. But you're right. It starts there as one of the key indicators of a school that is a candidate for it. But we also look at, enrollment. We look at capacity. If there's 1,500 capacity in a building has 1,500 student capacity, and it has 300 kids, we got to figure out how to make better use of that building. Doesn't mean moving the kids. It might mean moving another group of kids there. We look at feasibility check. So I'll just name it. We said before, Port Houston, Pleasantville, that area, and Holland, there are 3 campuses. There is no nearby school that has a much stronger facility. So you're going to see we're going to pick the best of the 2 bad facilities, facility-wise. And then the holistic view as we look at the context, the academic capacity. So it's not an easy decision. It's not a matter of just plugging it into a formula and spitting out a school that we should close. And we started last spring and had discussions all the way up until now. We paused for a minute, but because of greater than expected enrollment decrease and because of some structural issues that came up and because of that ratio, that repair costs over renewal costs, building new, changed dramatically over 6 months, we're going to have to do we're going to have to bring it to the board. So, bottom line, 12 schools are closing, but only 11 facilities. That means there were 2 schools and 1 campus. We're just going to combine them. 12 schools are closing. 7 of the 11 are actual close campuses. We're going to close 7 campuses. 4, those campuses will close, but they will be co-located. Co-located. So there'll be 2 schools in one facility. You follow me? That's our definition of co-location. 2 schools, 1 facility. And then we'll continue to offer unique programming if any of them had it. And then We're not closing 2 schools that would have been closed, but we're going to make those 2 campuses future 2 schools. K-8, future 2 schools. So we saved those 2 schools from closure. Here's the list that I'm going to provide for the board. You have it in your packet. We can provide way more detail. We also have the 26th. But Alcott to Madding. So Alcott is an elementary school going to Madding Elementary School. That's the ones on the right are the receiving school. So the ones on the left are the schools we're closing. Briscoe to Carrillo, Burris to Kennedy, Franklin to Gallegos, NQ Henderson to Bruce, Port Houston to Pleasantville. This is what I was talking about. Pleasantville isn't a great facility, but it's stronger facility-wise. It's better than Port Houston. And then Ross to Ross sits close to 2 schools. We're going to give the kids a choice because C. Martinez is one of those future 2 schools. So we're not closing C. Martinez. We're not closing Roosevelt, of course. Ross is what we're closing. They can have a choice to go to those 2 schools. And then these are the schools that we will co-locate. Cage to Lantrip, co-location. What that means is you still have the staff, you still have the principals, you still have the name of the school, Cage, and you have Lantrip also there. So Cage at the Lantrip facility. Lantrip is...
Why?
Lantrip has close to 1,500 or 1,400 seats, 1,450, I believe. Cage has 300 some kids. Lantrip has 400 kids, something like that. If I get the details are in your packet, the numbers of kids. So they have more than enough space. Lantrip's FCI is really, by the way, I can pull those charts up if you want, but they're in your appendix. Lantrip is a relatively new school, great building, great facilities, 2/3 of it not being used. This gives us a chance. I don't know if you've been to Cage. Cage has some structural issues now. They've always had, but it's getting worse and worse. And they've had HVAC problems and heating problems since I've been here and before. So, so it's a chance to put kids into a nice facility. They're real close, less than a mile or somewhere around a mile. I don't have my chart in front of me, but less than a mile away, so this is an opportunity to do that. Fleming and McReynolds, both, to Mickey Leland. Mickey Leland, similar, almost a brand new facility, a small men's boys' school. We're going to put them on one floor, which I think they've already done, and the other floor will be used by the middle school. So it'll be the middle school at Mickey Leland. Mickey Leland Middle School and Mickey Leland Young Men's Preparatory College Academy. Yes, ma'am.
But only single sex in the elementary? Is that what you're thinking? Or it's going to grow?
No, the 612 is on one floor, be separate from the others.
Okay, that's what I mean. So one's going to be boys only and the other's going to be...
There's no elementary. Fleming and McReynolds will be a middle school, not boys only. The boys only will be on one floor. Now, eventually, the middle school might want to be, I mean, that's a decision down the road, and probably the elected board will deal with that decision. Hobby to Lawson. Hobby, we brought you structural issues at Hobby. It's not dangerous now, but it's not going to get better. So we will continue to make sure that Hobby is safe through the rest of this year, of course, but we're going to need to move those kids. But at Hobby, we are going to take the pre-K and kinder just to have a little bit more space at Lawson to the MLK Early Childhood Center. And then finally, Gulfton has 60 kids. We're just going to absorb them into Liberty High School and give them the advantage of having the programs that Liberty High School has. They're in the same building right now, just separated. So we're just going to close that and make it much more efficient. there are many more schools we could talk about. And let me just finish up, then I'll take questions. These are the two that are going to be the future two pilots, so those kids don't go anywhere unless they want to transfer to somewhere, but we're not closing these two schools. So they'll be open, they'll be called Greg, they'll be called Clemente Martinez, but they'll be a future two pilot schools. And finally, we know we got a lot of sense making to do. So over the next week and a half, 2 weeks, we'll be talking to the families at the impacted schools, the ones closing and the ones receiving, both. We started that tonight, by the way, with emails or messages through Parent Square. And then, we'll have many more opportunities for families to ask questions, tour their new school, make information available. We'll have a responsive support team at each school, so a couple people who are responsible for answering parent questions. We'll honor the schools that are closing, and we'll figure out a way to celebrate that at each campus with the principal and SDMC. And then each receiving school will have a kids welcome event. We'll probably have to bus them during the school day just so they can see the school and things like that. So that's what we're going to do with families. And for staff, that also started with information. We had a meeting with principals this morning, and then they had meetings with staff. We'll have another staff communications that also went out, but we'll have face-to-face meetings and FAQs with staff. And then same thing, responsive HR support team, priority placement, and priority preference. Just so you are aware, because the biggest thing on people's mind usually is, what about my job? And the answer is this. If we're still evaluating people like we always do, and if you're progressing 2 and above at a closing school, you'll still have a job as a teacher in this district next year. If you're progressing 1 and the principal wants to retain you, you will still have a job in this district next year. If you're unset, you don't have a job anyway. And if you're progressing 1 where the principal doesn't want you back, you also will not be here. That's the same rules we used before. So it has nothing to do with closing. We're not trying to get rid of teachers this way. In fact, minimize the number of closures. I mean, Austin, which is, not even half our size, is closing 10 schools, and we're just closing, 12. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation, and it's never an easy conversation, but it sounds like the analysis has gone into it, and I appreciate the depth of thought. I would go back to that last slide because that's what I want to just applaud and double underline and encourage us to really lean into this information and support for the 149,000 parents who are not going to show up to these meetings and not be a part. What they care about are very practical things. And they're going to be thinking about at the dinner table very practical, logistical, very practical things. So I just really encourage our team to wrap our arms around these families and empathize with the fact that this is a very they love the school, they love the teachers, they love the friends, but it becomes a very practical thing. How do I get to work and still drop you off, right? That kind of stuff. So just lean in hard here and make sure we wrap our arms around those families. Thank you.
And I think that's well said, and that is our intent. I mean, again, one of the reasons why we've taken so long, maybe too long, to make this hard decision is because of the impact on kids. And yeah, we get it. You're a school of 150 kids, but there are 150 sets of parents, or almost that many sets, that are who like that school. The school has an A or B, and it's like, okay, what's wrong with my school? The facility is safe, but it's not optimal. It's not optimal. And a couple of facilities are not going to be safe, 2 years from now. So we got to make a decision. But we will do what you said, sir, and we will focus on making sure those families get information and get as much care going to a new school.
Thank you for the presentation. Two quick questions. One, are there any elementary schools and middle schools in the same feeder pattern on this list of closures?
Yes, and I don't have a map in front of me. Can anybody answer that specifically for me? Which we have it. We can show you in the board session, closing session.
Okay. And my second.
But most of them are concentrated in one part of town. You're going to see that on the map.
Okay. And my second question is, I know we're not taking a vote this evening, but for parents who are already mentally making a decision, what is the district going to do from a school choice application standpoint for those who are maybe have already decided they want to do something else?
For these schools, we are extending the choice window till, that's the next slide. So you can see where the closing date now is March 5th for this in the middle, on the bottom, for students impacted by school closure. The regular closing date was 27th.
I just have a couple comments. Appreciate your comments. I know when we're out talking to families and on the listening tours that we do, the biggest thing is about communication. So that's going to be so important for us. And I'd rather our parents and teachers and principals get so much more information than they ever wanted to see, as opposed to maybe missing an email or something going to their junk box, because that's what they're saying, right? Communicate with us, just give us more information than we ever wanted to know. So I appreciate that. And same thing about school choice. I was going to ask about how that would work, but now we have the answers.
You'll be happy to know that communications went out already? Okay, so maybe while I was speaking, we're at 7 o'clock.
To that end, besides the home school and that principal, if there is a direct path to someone in the district office, I know normally our answer is go to your principal, but this is way beyond that. So I hope there's a clear jump connection where there's a phone call or a person who is responsible for responding. And if that's not already in the loop, please let's put that in the loop. Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll do both, because while some people want to go right to the district, most parents are going to go to the people they know at the school. So we'll do both.
Great. Well, thank you.
And I
How's everybody
think
doing?
That's it.
If anybody needs to take a break, go ahead and we'll just keep going. Yeah. Okay.